welcome to World Talks. I'm your host, Sasha Farbach. Now, as EU foreign ministers meet in Luxembourg today, the war in Ukraine has once again taken center stage, this time following a deadly Russian missile strike on Sumy that left at least 34 civilians dead, including children. The attack has triggered fresh outrage and calls for stronger action from Brussels. Meanwhile, the EU faces growing pressure to define its role in a rapidly shifting geopolitical landscape, from rethinking ties with Africa and the Western Balkans to reassessing its strategy in the Middle East. Now, I'm joined to discuss all this by Marcin Bużański, Director, Center for Diplomacy and Negotiation, Collegium Civitas, to break it all down. Good to have you on the program.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Now, let's jump right into this. This terrible attack in Sumy, hundreds injured, 34 dead confirmed at this point in time. What can we now expect from the European Union? Will there be not just condemnation? Can we see something tougher come out of this critical meeting here in Luxembourg?
Well, I think that there will be, of course, very strong words of condemnation and underlying that this is as strong proof as possible that Russia does not want peace, that it is not progressing towards a ceasefire, and that very simply it is some actor in international affairs who cannot be trusted at any point, which means that the process of the EU of arming itself, of preparing to arm Ukraine and support Ukraine in the long run, is the right one and is the correct one. And the attack in Sumy has been the proof of that. Of course, taken apart the horrific loss of life and civilian casualties, and the very fact that this has been a ballistic missile that was used in this attack, which proves another point that Ukraine desperately needs EU support, particularly when it comes to building up its air defenses and its capabilities to protect the skies from such attacks that are being harmed by the U.S. Military support withdrawal from Ukraine. So all of this, of course, will be on the table. It will be further negotiated. There are still obstacles. I don't expect them to be resolved at this meeting or in the coming weeks, but steadily the EU and its partners, such as the UK, such as Norway, are working hand in hand to try to establish a process of sustained support for Ukraine in any scenario, including a scenario of continued Russian attacks, of no ceasefire, and of U.S. withdrawal. This has to be discussed. This has to be a plan for this has to be in place, and the EU is aware of this. This attack in Sumy won't be a changing moment. It won't be a defining factor. It is simply a proof that the Europeans' take on Russia, Europeans' approach to supporting Ukraine is the right one and needs to be continued. And I think this is also very important when you look at what the narrative that Russia is building, and also how it resonates in the White House, that also Europe makes this message as clear and as strong as possible.
I was going to ask you on that point, because we have already condemnation from various policy leaders across Europe. Foreign Minister Sikorski of Poland very much appalled by this, saying that this is also a mockery of the potential ceasefire process. But interesting, you mentioned the White House. Do you think that this potentially could be a moment now? We've already had condemnation from Marco Rubio, from other people in the administration. Could this have the White House be more in line with the European Union's plan? Will they finally listen to more of a different narrative and be a bit tougher on Russia?
I doubt that the White House position will change much. I think we are hearing words of condemnation from a number of officials, but we've also heard Donald Trump say that, the Russians said it was some degree of a mistake. He looks at ways out to continue with his line of reasoning, being that you can talk with Russia, you can negotiate with Russia, Russia is a partner, and we have to find a solution. So this line is not affected. We can see that already. So I doubt that it will change. It might exert a bit more pressure, but we're still looking at Trump basically talking Putin's line here, unfortunately. And we are seeing a situation where still Russia is playing the game with the US, where it is really doing what it's done from the beginning, continuing to attack Ukraine and basically saying it will not stop the fighting, it will not sign a ceasefire under the current conditions, and building a narrative of creating a space where Ukraine really loses its sovereignty and gives territory to Russia, which is, of course, unacceptable for Ukraine and is also unacceptable for Europe, which has been stated very, very clearly. So I think the line of the US administration has right now will continue. The big question is what can give Donald Trump a win in Ukraine, in his opinion, which would be some level of ceasefire, how strong he can push Putin for that, and what will Ukraine then do and Europe do if there is some kind of a US-Russian agreement, how the ceasefire could look like. This is really the big question here.
I still want to jump in. Sorry to interrupt you, Marcin, but we mentioned Europe a few times. Still, I want to get your insights as well. Europe, big topic today. Generally, other policy areas as well. And I'm also struck by one of the big concentrations, which is about the EU and Palestine. The Palestinian Authority, the EU is one of its biggest donors. Just a recent announcement, they're going to be increasing their financial donation there to about 1.6 billion euros. That three-year package that the European Union will announce has come from one of the commissioners for the Mediterranean. How is this going to work out for the EU? Is there now more of a policy in line together? How do we assess the EU and Palestinian Authority relationship given this recent announcement?
The EU has to make a stand in the Middle East. Right now, the whole region is on the verge of major changes and shifts. We could see a number of scenarios unfolding, either with a deal with Iran or a war with Iran, with Syria being stabilized or with Syria falling apart, with Israel being more belligerent in Gaza and in Lebanon, what we're seeing, or taking a step back. Now, in all of those scenarios, the EU has been truly on the sidelines. Now the EU is trying to make one step or two steps forward to show that they also have a stake in this game, that we have the financial resources as the European Union to engage, and we're supporting the Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority, to stay in the territory that currently has, and to create some level of sovereignty and the structure of this Palestinian state. This has been also something the EU has been supporting, and this money is supposed to back this policy line. The EU has been also very critical when it comes to Israel's actions in the region. Of course, not all countries agree fully on the same approach here, but overall, there has been a lot of criticism on not a stabilizing factor of Israel's actions, but destabilizing for the region, and that Palestinians need their own state, need their own territory, and without that, we cannot talk of any stability or peace in the region. This money is to support the Palestinians in achieving this.
Okay. Just really briefly on some quick concern as well. Western Balkans also a major issue. What do you sense here? How important is this for the EU moving forward?
Well, let's look at this is the closest neighborhood. If we've seen destabilization all around in the neighborhood, it's critical for the EU to be strongly engaged in the Western Balkans. And we're seeing on many levels signs of instability and of foreign interference. Russia is doing all it can to destabilize the region. And if there would be any ceasefire in Ukraine, you can bet that they will then double or triple their efforts to destabilize the Western Balkans. We are seeing turbulence in Serbia. We're seeing turbulence in Bosnia and Herzegovina, particularly in Republika Srpska. We are seeing also a stalled, in many ways, enlargement process that needs to be accelerated right now, with a strong message coming to the Western Balkans that is not just about Ukraine and Moldova. We're seeing the Western Balkans as a future part of the EU, and we want to make this process advance. So all of these things are strategically important objectives for the European Union, and particularly in a destabilizing and uncertain world, and more clear that, for instance, the US will be also less engaged in the Western Balkans. The EU has to make a step, an important and bold step here, to show that the Western Balkans will be part of the EU, that they want this enlargement to happen, that they want stability there, and that the European Union with partners is ready to act on this. So I think this will be the critical important messages coming for the Western Balkans.
Right. Well, so it sounds like from Africa, from the Middle East, across the world, really, the EU will have its hands full. Many, many things there to discuss. Thanks for all that insight. Really appreciate it. Marcin Bużański there. Thank you for your time this morning.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
And thank you for watching World Talks. But stay tuned. There's much more news and comedy right here on TVP World. Goodbye.